So like Tanya has eloquently introduced, me and Tandu, we are from the Research Integrity Office at UNISA. We are passionate about research and training. We host a training program every year with a few workshops, and then we do ad hoc external training as well to other universities. We have a passionate manager that's very well versed, and she has a very long list of training and accolades on her CV. But so we are very fortunate to work with Dr. Visagie. So now, without further ado, I was also honor student in 2013 at UNISA, which makes me then a part of very good company, as I understand that you are doing your honors degree this year. So for me now, it's just to show you a little bit about why research integrity is important and what it is all about. And also just quickly to talk about a new theory that we have studied as part of the Embassy of Good Science late last year or middle last year, where they use virtue ethics theory and what does this mean for research integrity. Then we will just look at responsible conduct of a study. This entails now research integrity in your study, which part of your study is this important. Then we're going to stand still with that small word called ethics, which is now tongue in the cheek because, as you know, it's actually a very loaded word, and they are not good coverage in the research methodology. I felt for years covering research ethics. It's a small module. It basically covers 4 principles and that's it. So it's just not good enough, and students get stuck in their research because of this lack and limit. The Belmont Report, I graciously have borrowed this from Dr. Visagie's presentations because it gives you a very good overview of what is important, what is the principle all about, and how does this involve in your research. And then I'll shortly discuss the interrelation of research ethics and research integrity. Everybody always wants to know, but what is this all about? There will be references that you can also look up in your spare time, and then there will be the closing. So let's start in off why research integrity is important. I think with the wake of COVID and the pandemic and things moving to the online platform, this has illustrated an intense desire to universities to move back to the classroom situation, just because it was so easy to be dishonest, just quickly having an open book. Although I always feel that an open book exam is actually the only thing that you must do. You must know your open book exam is much more difficult than any other exam. But there were some creativity around tests and so forth. Some of the universities has now moved back to the classroom and tests are in the classroom. And why is this? And it's not just that the students is a problem. It is a global phenomenon that there is so much new technology available that you can do so much with your work or with other people's work and then posing it off as your own work. And this is then part of what we are going to talk about and why it is important for you as a student to be honest. Because sometimes with the pressure of work and life and money, it could look like a good option to be dishonest and take some words from somebody else, maybe not cited, just creatively change it a bit and then pose it as your own work. And it could look like a solution for a short-term problem, but it could also pose a long-term problem for you in your academic career, in your work situation. So what is research integrity then? This definition is quite illuminating and one of the best that we often use. It's intellectual honesty in proposing, performing, and reporting research accuracy in representing your contributions to research proposals and reports. There must be fairness in peer review and collegiality in scientific interactions, including communications and sharing of resources. This is, in short, what research integrity is all about. Now, this is for homework. If you want to, you can look at it, this YouTube video. It's quite interesting, it's quite creative, it's different, where I took Aristotle's theory, and then they explain to you, imagine a person who always know what to say, can diffuse a tense situation, deliver tough news gracefully, who's confident without being arrogant, who's brave but not reckless, generous but not extravagant, someone who mastered the art of being a person, being virtuous. And if you unpack Ubuntu, this is all the attributes of Ubuntu. That a person is a person because of the other person. So the personhood is very important for Ubuntu, but it was also for Aristotle. And he then had this golden mean that you have to find a middle ground between trust and honesty. You can be too honest or not honest. So this is a whole theory, and we have studied this, and it's working very well. We are having a program in the university it's called the Ambassador Program for Research Integrity and Academic Integrity, but we have trained 25 academic integrity ambassadors in the colleges. They are employees of UNISA, academic employees, and some other support staff. And then we're going to train this further, and we are busy now with a program program development, possibly on Moodle, that we will also have available for the students, but it's very early phase. But look at the video, it's quite interesting. So what does virtue ethics mean? What they are saying is that virtue ethics then is an ethical theory that emphasizes an individual's character rather than following a set of rules. A virtue then is often described as a behavior that lies between two extremes of vices. This is the golden mean theory, but it's very in-depth. So you have to study this to understand it, and you also have to really practice this. But interestingly enough, they emphasize then that an individual's character is then core to this theory. Rather than to follow a set of rules or have a tick box approach, which we always say is so often the thing that we all strive, just more, we have millions of forms and checklists and review, and if you just tick a box, that's fine. But really to be a person, what does it take to be a person? What is your character traits? What does it mean? Now in this theory, then they also have discussed numerous virtues, and they are not just honesty and fairness. They are an array of virtues that a human can portray, and all of these virtues is something to strive towards. And these things are not, yes, you can be born with a virtuous character. I doubt that you are. We are born with the sins of our fathers and our ancestors, and we acquire behavior. We have a certain character, but we acquire things. We can sometimes hide who we are and be another person. They talk about this often, and especially in the demanding world that we are living today, they call this the imposter syndrome, where you are somebody else because who you are is maybe not acceptable for you, or you deem that it's not acceptable for the environment that you are in, and that you have to be a certain person to be accepted, to be valued. So all of these virtues can be practiced and acquired. I just thought to put this in for you. We're not going to stand still here. This is basically only an introduction. Now here is what is important for you. I've tried to, and I'm sure I can improve on this list, but I have tried to illustrate to you where is it that research integrity is needed, and how then to do, what to consider, how would you do it? So it starts off at the very early stage of your research problem. Your lecturer or your guideline will tell you, identify a problem in your area of control. What is your span of control really? So where are you working? Where are you staying? What is a real life problem? How can you change this? And you read up on this. And sometimes you see, okay, no, but there's a lot of information on this, and you move to another one. I think I've studied 3 different topics before I settled on my honor study small project. Because as you read in the literature, you say, okay, no, but my idea was okay, but it was already answered. So you study. Then you have to ask the question, okay, I can do this work. It's good. It's good. It's necessary for the environment, for my environment. It's necessary for my family. You can have an altruistic view. A lot of people have an altruistic motive when they do research. In medical theory and medical work, that is very common. I do this, I study this, I go in this clinical trial because of my mom who passed away, or my sister, or my brother, or friend. So research problems are problems that you as an individual are confronted with every day. You want to improve the situation at your clinic or at your local post office. So if you have a research problem, it's important to answer the question, what is the social value of the research? If it's okay for me, will it be okay for other people? And this is important. Then in data selection, you consider a host of things. When you understand what you're going to do, what will your data be? You have to consider heuristic persons. Part of our struggle these days is that we have the Papaya Act, and this is a very good act, but you have to consider special consideration, special permissions for special information. And special information is a long list of things these days, and it includes stuff that researchers in the past used as descriptive studies. So you will have to give a descriptive overview of your population, and then you will say it's X, Y, and Z. Now we say, okay, you can't just add any kind of objective to your study. You can't say I want to study the behavior of people at a local post office because they are littering the environment. So I want to go and look to them. I want to go to them and I want to ask them, why are they littering the environment? What is the reasons behind it? So you have your objectives. But now this is maybe a good study, and if you know why they do it, maybe you can propose a set of guidelines how not to do it. But you also want to interview now the post office because you think that the post office is the reason, or the lack of service could be a reason, or they don't have good hours. People have to stand in long queues. Now you say, right, I'm going to consider the knowledge of customers waiting at the post office at Montana, Pretoria, South Africa. Now, the post office, Montana, South Africa, has a right as a heuristic person to be considered and also to be protected. You can't just now, and you have in your title that you're going to look at this, because What if your work eventually go to your findings and there's a very negative connotation? How will you mask this in your work? Then on the other flip side of the coin, you have to consider informed consent. Now you're going to interview the people in the queue, but you can't just interview people. You have to ask their permission to be part of this research of yours. Then you have to consider gatekeeping. I have to go to the post office to ask them, this is my study all about. This is what I want to aim and achieve. Can you consider giving me gatekeeping when I protect X, Y, and Z? When you do indigenous work in the community, you have to consider prior informed consent, because the gatekeeping in the communities are much higher. Um, it's a much more difficult process. You have to introduce your work, you have to get informed consent to do the study, and you have to consider the gatekeepers, all the leaders in the community, and then only you can consider looking at participants. And you have to consider risks and benefits. Then methods. You have to consider your environment. If you are the researcher going to Montana, Victoria, is it safe for you to go there? Do you have to ask somebody else to go with you? How will you safeguard your human participants in your study? What is the conflict of interest declarations? You are working with another student. What is the conflict there? Then you have to consider mutual agreements with co-researchers. Later with authorship, this is very important. You start off with a very good idea. You have co-workers, but did you think it through and did you talk it through? Do you know what their part of the work is going to be? What if they pull out of this work just before the end? What if they say they did do work and they didn't? So although it could be a friendly situation in the start, it could be a very bad situation in the end. And if you go and visit all of there's a very good site at United States that got an Office for Research Integrity. It's called, I think it's ORI, ORI. If you look it up on your internet, you get to the site and then your mouth falls open. There's literally, they name and shame people on that site. And some of the cases that you get there is students asking questions. My colleague didn't do this. My supervisor didn't do this. My supervisor published the paper without putting my name on it. And it's my work. Things like this. It's out there. Then correct citations, how to cite correctly. Your work will go through Turnitin, which will pick up if you plagiarized. But like I say, these days there's a lot of creative ways to do it. But in the end, it is your work and you have to be proud of it. And if somebody cites your work, there's nothing better in the world if you write an article and somebody in a prominent research group cites your article. Nothing. Then your report and publication. Adherence to Principle 7. This is just sitting it out there, but I'll come to it later. It's the joint statement on ethical publishing that was issued in South Africa, and it's part of your resource documents. Adherence to Principle 7 is just that you need to understand that you can't extrapolate. If you have age and gender in your study, now you can't go and say, I have done work on the children in Harankua in area so and so, and it seems like the teenagers have a lot of problem with alcoholism. And this then leads us to believe that this is a problem in South Africa because of X, Y, and Z. You can't associate a whole community if you don't have enough grounds or scientific rigor to say something like this. Something to consider. Authorship, there's a whole set of rules. It's available everywhere. I didn't include it per se in your resources, but it's I can send you a document on it. But authorship is just every institution has their own set of rules. In South Africa, we have the department DHET, which is looking at research output. So at UNISA, we aspire to have a research output because this is also as a way of a research third stream income for the university, and researchers rely on this funding. And but not only for this, there's a lot of rules with this. But normally, your supervisor will know the rules, and they should then follow the rules in the institution of the study. Avoid predatory journals when you publish. There's a lot of information on this as well. I can provide you with the sites. Very tricky. They look all fine, but they are not. They are not on any of the lists. Please work with your librarians. They are your most valued partner except your supervisor. They are your most valued partner in your study because they will know exactly which journals you have to avoid and which you can consider. And then publications, there's a website, Think, Check and Submit, which is also then helping with this. So that is in short research integrity per se. I'll get to that again at the end of this work. Now the evolution of research ethics and the small word called ethics. In the 3 training, you will get in the module 1, you'll get a whole set of information on why research ethics became important. I thought to just include this for you because sometimes it gives you just a good starting point. Maybe some of you have already done 3. And if you didn't, I would ask you to maybe consider it because you get a certificate. Some of the colleges at UNISA ask that you, as a prerequisite, do 3 before you embark on your research proposal. Now, the evolution of research ethics and why it became important is the Nuremberg trials in 1946, as you know, after the World War II and all the atrocities. This became the first starting point. Then the Declaration of Helsinki arrived in 1964, and we saw the last revision of this in 2013. The Declaration of Helsinki was followed by the Belmont Report, since although the declaration was there was still a lot of research ethics and ethics in research activity, controversials and problems. So the Belmont Report then arrived in 1979, and this is still the core document that we use in our normative guidelines for research ethics today. Belmont Report is used in the policy for research ethics. It's used widely there. It's used in the Department of Health ethics guidelines. That's also part of the resource document. And it's the document that you can use for your study. Then there was also the UN Declaration of Bioethics and Human Rights. If you want to know, if you want to look at it, it's not a long document. It's beautifully written. You can use this in your study. And then there was also the Council for International Organization of the Medical Sciences, the CIOMS Council, CIOMS guidelines. A wonderful set of guidelines which you can access if you have studies in a medical kind of field. So yes, that is the normative guidelines and the evolution of them. So what is ethics then? So ethics is where what is important for ethics. And let me just quickly give you an introduction to ethics. Ethics is a subdiscipline of philosophy. So ethics are derived from theories. There were a lot of theories following where we are now. And I won't stand still there because it's not now important, but the theories then, people were looking at the theories and then came up with core values and concepts of ethics for research then involving humans. So ethics in research is based on values. Those values are abstract concepts like truth, dignity, and fairness, and is of great importance for human well-being. And can you hear that the values that's mentioned in this section is actually the values that we already have talked about with regards to research integrity. But in this case, then the values then are often expressed as principles, which is now the principles that we are using as in our studies. So what is the principle of ethics then? The principle of ethics is to facilitate protection of human rights and dignity. So you have to justify the inclusion of humans in research. You have to ensure the science value and validity. You can't include humans in your study and there's no social value. You have to ask the question, why? Your study have to bring about more good than harm. Most of the researchers and senior researchers and good researchers with high ratings, NRF ratings will tell you, because they are the knowledgeable people in their field and they are very passionate about research and their research, and they are doing great things. But they will sometimes think that maybe it won't be a problem, because it just won't, because it will be at the end, it will bring more about more good than harm. But still, you have to show the participant this. They won't know it when they read the informed consent. You have to promote the interest of humans who participate in research before the interest of science and society. You will study this specifically in the 3 program as well. Always promote the interest of humans before the interest of science and society. This is the rule. If you ever don't know, this is the rule. You have to ask yourself that all the time. You have to then look at voluntary participation. Your participant, even if they have the gatekeeper approval of the community leader, each human being participating in research will have to give a single, on its own merit, informed consent to be part of a research study. Even children. It's called assent then. The parents sign informed consent, but the child signs assent. Now, in every country, this rules change, because the rule in South Africa is 18 for an adult, 18 for it to be an adult. So an 18-year-old teenager can participate in research without consent of the parent. They do their own informed consent. It's always important to look at countries when you do your research in and consider all their rules, because this is important for your study as well. You have to distribute the risks and potential benefits of research fairly. When we consider research proposals in the ethics committee, sometimes this is not very well, because people blur on these lines. They will give you 2 sentences and say, I will consider the Belmont report, and the information will be not linked to any persons, and it will be anonymous. That is not good enough. When you record, when you stand there in the line in the post office and you look and you want to know their behavior and you ask them a set of questions and you record it, did you ask them permission that you're going to record it? Or did you just not say it, but just do it? What do you consider? What is the risk of them participating in your research? What is the potential benefits of them participating in your research? That you put that up front. If you send a questionnaire to a company, an online survey, that you take into consideration that survey takes away time, if it's a 15-minute survey. And by the way, there's a very low uptake on surveys. We think it's because of the nature of our studies and our work that we are online 100% of the day, and we are avoiding any further information and work. So uptake of online surveys in research is very poor. Just consider that as well as with your research. But you have to consider, do you give these people enough time to decide? Do you give them enough time? Do you bother them? Will there be no risk? What is the potential benefit? You have to put this up front and think about it while you are looking at your proposal. Show ongoing respect for persons. Now I've sent my questionnaire now to the post office because I'm going to triangulate my findings. Now I want to know from the post office, why are they so slow? Why do people have to stand in line the whole day? Why do they litter? Because there's not enough bins. Why is there not enough bins? What is your challenges at the post office? But you gave them the questionnaire today, and Friday you send them a reminder. Monday you send a second reminder. Can you see that you are also, this is called, you batter them to some extent, you overutilize them, you are stretching the resource, you are overstretching the resource, you are building in a danger. So you have to show ongoing respect for persons. If anything changed in your study, you have to also inform your participants. Uphold transparency. For example, your colleague could have done the work already and work on another post office. If you then determine the problem, say for example, there was industrial action and they couldn't remove the bins in time and they find this out. Why do you have to bother another 20 participants at the Montana post office to just get this information? Then you say, good, we know this is the problem, we understand it, now I just want to ask you X, Y, and Z. You have to uphold transparency. If something changes, you have to consider this. Now, the normative guidelines in research ethics is the Belmont Report, Declaration of Helsinki. There's the health research guidelines that I've also included. SAPRA is then in clinical trials. This is our health products regulatory authority in South Africa. And if you do clinical trials, then you have to register at SAPRA as well. Now, the Belmont Report. There are 4 moral principles in the Belmont Report. They are autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice. These are the 4 core principles in research ethics. Autonomy is all about the rights and dignity of research participants. Beneficence then is the positive contribution towards the welfare of people. What is it? What to promote more good and harm. Non-maleficence then means, maleficence means causing harm. Non-maleficence then not to cause harm to participants in particular or people in general. Here in a study, you will follow the risk, the balance on the risk and the benefits. You do a balance on the risk and benefits. So if the benefits outweigh the risks, the study can go forward. But if there are risks, you have to look at safeguarding the risk and how to minimize the risk and how to involve the least amount of people to get to the same answer. Then justice is then the benefits and risk of research that should be fairly distributed among people. So if I do the study at the post office, why do I only include a certain, say I only include men in my study? If you have studied in the literature and you came about information that said men litter when standing in a queue, and there was some scientific information about this, you can argue, I'm just going to do it on males because there's evidence that they are the ones littering. And I don't want to waste time now to include also women because that will just delay, you see. But there must be some kind of justification. So the benefits and risks then of the study must be fairly distributed. And this is the four principles. I've included the slides as part of the resources so you can read it in your own leisure. But in the first instance, as we have talked already about, you obtain informed consent. Voluntary, freely, informed, they need to know what it is all about. They have to give explicit agreement to participate. You have to consider the capacity. In the 3 training, the specific module on informed consent is module 3. 3.1. They give you a very good idea of all the aspects of informed consent to consider. Now, not to exclude important research, for example, on children, on a vulnerable group, like children, people in captivity, which is prisoners, refugees. You have to consider a whole host of things. People that's incapacitated. People that is in a home, like elderly people, people that have mental capacity or even physical capacity, a loss of that or disabilities, they are also captured. When anybody is in a home or in a setting where there's another gatekeeper, they are captive. And what is the conditions then to involve them in these studies? And we talked about assent for the children and so forth. Then beneficence and non-maleficence is just that. Do more good than harm. Ensure the credibility of the science. Take cognizance of the social and scientific value. The scientific validity of your whole proposal, that it should go like a golden thread for your proposal. That your work, your data, all of those must be embedded in scientific methods that you can go and you can actually acquire information built on a scientific base. That your publication is something to be proud about and people can cite it. You have to manage your conflict of interest. And then very important, and sometimes this is left out by most of the researchers, you cannot believe it, you have to include what will your results of the research, what is the results of the research, will it be made available to participants? Are you going back to that line? Are you going back to the post office, informing them of the hardship of the people in the queue? What could they do to improve this? So this is a very important point. What is the benefit for participants in taking part in the research? Identify the risks and benefits. Even if you think there's none, there could be implied risks. If there's no benefit for me to participate in the survey, there's an implied benefit. Look for it. Don't tell the review committee there's none. Your study design, you have to minimize the risk and potential benefits must be maximized. Justice. We have already talked about this. Now let's just stand still. This is the last slide. What is the intersection then between integrity and ethics? So with integrity, as explained, you do research in ways that promote confidence in the results. The researchers, your professional standing, and the research community, because you adhere to professional standards, which then include honesty in all aspects of the research, accountability in the conduct of the research. You have to take accountability for your research or work, professional courtesy and fairness in working with others, your co-workers, your supervisor, where you are, good stewardship of research on behalf of others. You need to stand on your own feet and say, this is my work, this is my university's work, this is my supervisor's work. So I've included the Singapore statement in your resource document. I think I did, I hope I did. It's a global guide to responsible conduct of research. It looks at the values and your standards of behavior. It looks at the virtue, your character traits or dispositions. Where you're coming from. What is your mindset? What do you want to reach? How did it change? Look at the values that you judge desirable or admirable things. I've included a joint published statement on ethical research and publishing practices. They found that even having the Singapore statement, looking at research integrity and how to do better, there was still a lack of certain things happening. So they've published this statement, and you can read through it. It's only a page, but we use it often, very, very often in our teaching and so on in the workshops, but also in our certificates and when we approve research. And then ethics. You know now what's ethics as well. You do research with a firm conviction not to harm anyone. This includes participants, yourself, employers, funders, and the society. Keeping just in mind the 4 pillars will take you far. Respect for others, do good, do no harm, be fair and just in all your research decisions and practices. The Belmont Report, you can access it there, and then Emmanuel Ezekiel 8 standards for research. Amazing. They are embedded in the DOH 2015 guidelines, which now currently they are looking at a new publication of the guidelines, which will consider a lot of elements regarding Africanization, IKS systems, 4IR, a lot of new developments in the world will be included. But the DOH guidelines, if you only read that, you'll be safe. Because they are still a very good resource document. They did an amazing job with the 2050 guidelines. And we also still use them. Even if we set up a new standards last year for SADC, we look at standards for research again, we used the DOH. And I then discovered again that this is an all-encompassing guideline. So please, if you are stuck, just go and consider the guidelines of the DOH. Here's just a screenshot of the statement on ethical research that's included. Principle 7, social awareness. Researchers and institutions must be sensitive to the potential impact of their research on society, marginal groups or individuals, and must consider these when weighing the benefits of the research against any harmful effects with a view to minimize or avoiding the latter where possible. Can you see that this is embedded in research ethics, but it is a guide, it's a principle in a research integrity document? So the research integrity is the fine golden thread of your research, and ethics is then when you have to consider, and you have to consider just one sentence. What do I ought to do in my research study? I want to thank you for listening. And I love this quote. Always use it. Do the best you can until you know better. Then, when you know better, do better. Thank you, Tanya.